Sekeres Price for Thursday, June 6th, 2024. We're coming to you from the Nation Network studio built by Arbor Lee here at the iconic Wall Center, downtown Vancouver. And if you're looking to visit downtown, make it a staycation perhaps. 604-331-1000. Call the Wall. Ask for the Sekeres Price rates. Some blackout dates apply. Matt Sekeres alongside Blake Price, Grady Sassett and Switches conducting things. Big show coming up. All brought to you by Applewood Auto Group.
And at Applewood Auto Group, they implore you to go pay them a visit at Applewood Nissan in Surrey. Check out the fabulous deals that they've got on a variety of vehicles, including the 2024 Aria. It's an electric vehicle that you haven't seen before. Lease or finance them from 1.99% of set in this vehicle. It is a beauty. Go check it out. Applewood Nissan in Langley. It's all good at Applewood.
Poll question today asking you, would you trade high on any Canuck coming off a good season? Brock Besser, Connor Garland, Nils Höglander, Artur Schillovs. You can vote yes or no at Sekeres Price on Twitter or X and YouTube. And if you are voting yes, reply with whom. I could be tempted on Garland and Besser because of their contractual situations. In the case of Brock Besser, he's going into the final year of his deal. In the case of Connor Garland, he has completely rehabilitated value after last year when the league deemed his contract untradeable. Garland has 2 years left, just shy $5 million. But if I'm considering on either of these guys, that's a position of weakness, as we all know, the wing. So if I'm further depleting myself on the wing, it's got to be a clear win of a trade. I voted yes, but it was a very soft yes. What says you?
Yeah, same thing. As I said on social, like I'm not pounding the pavement here on any of these files, but I would consider it certainly, and I would have that in my back pocket should I need it.
Would you be surprised, because this management group did spend a fair bit of time trying to trade Brock Besser and Connor Garland? I'm not necessarily sure that they felt like these two players were, of their jib, the type of guys that you could win with going forward. And then both of them, to their infinite credit, with all of that buzzing in the background behind them, and of course, in Brock's case, he has had so much that has weighed on him during the course of his hockey career. But to their infinite credit, the two of them had phenomenal seasons.
Yeah, I mean, you have to make a very accurate calculus of where you're headed, where the salary cap is headed, where your salary cap is headed, and then try to project exactly where that's all going on. So
I would think that Tocchet would kick and scream on Garland. Tocchet type player, get on the forecheck, wall work, all that.
Yeah.
Besser, I'm less sure on. Although, Besser scored 40 goals for you. He was your top gunner. And again, you're shy. This is one of the big weaknesses of the club. So perhaps he'd kick and scream on that one as well. Höglander's a little more interesting. Now, I say no on Höglander just because he's playing for $1 million and change. That is a very useful contract. A lot of utility there, particularly on a player who scored 24 goals. To me, the interesting question with Höglander is where he goes from here and how Canucks management, ownership, more management, the coaching staff feels he goes from here. Because, look, would I be surprised if Nils Höglander scored more than 24 goals next season? Not entirely. But I do wonder how 24 goals will look over the course of his career. I also...
Do you have faith that can be...
I have faith that he can be a 20 to 25 goal scorer.
Okay.
I'm not sure we're looking at a guy who tops 30. Or if he does, the old Ferraro, you score 32 goals 1 year, you're not a 32 goal scorer.
Yeah.
You just had a career year.
Yeah.
That's sort of the realm in which I see Höglander. going forward. But that's not the entirety of the question with the scrappy Swede. The other side of the coin is, does he become a better defensive player that brings you even more utility out there on the ice?
Right. If the 24 goals is static or
If it's
in and about.
Well, if it's 25 goals and a guy you've got to shelter in defensive matchups, then if you feel like that's the player he's going to be going forward, then I would consider a sell high this summer.
But 20
if
goals.
If you think he's 20 to 25 goals and is going to be a very responsible defensive player, then that's an entirely different commodity, and that's one that I would be very, very hesitant to move on.
I think a lot of people would take. I think a lot of people would take a decrease in goals scored
if it's
like not a profound decrease, but a decrease. A 20-goal guy,
right?
But played in all situations, great on the forecheck, great on the back check, all that stuff.
Right. And the thing about Höglander, and Boudreau mentioned this a couple of years back. If you're going to be that level of a defensive player, then you better be a 35 goal scorer. There's still defensive miscues out there. Some of the decision making, some of the shifts are too long, out of position from time to time. Needs to show the same fire, energy, determination to retrieve the puck and play his own zone as he does on the offensive side of things. The bottom line is these are correctable matters with a young player and young players make mistakes. So I'm very bullish on the future and on the upside of Höglander. I just think 24 goals this year. I think we're seeing someone who's maybe not at the height, but near the height of where the goal scoring is coming in. And I know many are going to yell at me and say, but what about power play? Doesn't play power play. Fair enough. What's the role for him on power play 1? Because it's not the bumper, right? Like you've got a hole there with Lindholm, but
correct.
You're not is Höglander dropping into the bumper, or do you have to move other people around to accommodate him on the power play?
I don't think Höglander's in the bumper. No.
Right.
No, that's got to be part of the free agent acquisition.
Right. So then if he's not in the bumper, then you're looking at a couple years down the road before you think he's going to be a power play 1 guy for you, unless there's injury.
Mm-hmm.
Where would he work on the power plays? The net front guy? Because he's not one of the flanks, right? With
no.
Pettersson and Miller, and he's not the bumper.
No.
So is he the net front guy?
Or the down low guy, I guess, jamming in pucks. Yeah.
As for Shelov's, again, somebody blows you away, I'll listen. But that's a cheap goaltender who may well have to be the heir apparent in a couple of years and would still be on a pretty good contract then. So
we talked about this with the Devils yesterday. There's a lot of teams actually that need goaltending, but they need certified goaltending. Mm-hmm. And Artur Shelov's just at this, and there's no fault of his own. He's 23. He's not that guy.
Like 20-some inning,
yeah.
Not yet, at least.
No.
Next year, I think you're looking at someone who
if he has a nice 30-game season this year, nice 25-game season this year, then maybe, yeah.
To me, the question is, does Artur Shelov's become Corey Schneider next year? Where you were sitting on a great young goaltender who on many other teams would be the starter. And not to relitigate, but I've had the debate with Gillis and Gilman many times before. If they had moved a little earlier on Schneider, did they have an extra defenseman? Did they have an extra forward for that 2011 Cup run?
Well,
and Mike and Lawrence will argue we needed 2 goaltenders, and they're not wrong. And you particularly need 2 goaltenders these days in the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Stuart Skinner winning the Stanley Cup
3
this year.
In some cases.
Stuart Skinner winning the Stanley Cup this year would go a long way in making Artur Shelov's, way more attractive a year from now. If he has a good year as an NHL backup next year, Artur Shelov's, having a 25-year-old hoisting the cup this year would say, solid young goalkeepers are winning the Stanley Cup these days all of a sudden.
Grady, you don't have to go through the particulars, but yes or no, where are you on the poll?
Yes.
Okay. So Rick Tocchet does some media yesterday as we get into our top story with regards to his staff, and Yogi Svejkovský, who has been promoted here to the bench from the skills position coach, as well as shifting duties and responsibilities for the Vancouver, for the Sedin twins, as well as the methodology here when they go out on the road, not to mention answering questions about his own contract. So there's plenty to unpack with Coach Tocchet. Let's just hear why Yogi. Mike Yeo leaves, gets a job with Travis Green, Rick Tocchet's good buddy with the Ottawa Senators, now the head coach of the Ottawa Senators. There's an opening on the bench. Yogi gets promoted from skills coach. Here's Rick Tocchet on the why.
Caught my attention when I first got here. I didn't know really much about him. And he just, every day when he'd come in, he impressed me on little things that whether I asked him or he brought to me, the way I wanted things done. And he had it on my table within, you give him a project and it's on my table like that. And he's got me like, his work ethic is next to none. And like I said, Daniel, I watch the players around them. Like they go by my office and they're looking. I'm going to go, do you need me? And they're like, no, we don't need you. We're looking for Yogi. So that impresses me. So they got his trust. Obviously, the skills part, really, he knows. Yogi and I spent a lot of time with each other last year on. He knows I like wall stuff. How do you handle coming out of the corner with body position? How do you defend in this position? How do you take the puck to this side? How do we tip pucks? And he kind of listens to what I like, and he kind of molds it and teaching the players what I want. And obviously, and actually what he believes in too. We believe in the same thing. And the same thing with the power play. Like he comes up with these different stats that what we have to get better on. Like we got to be a better downhill team, and he'll have stats, teams that like Edmonton where when they miss the net or they go downhill, they're in a retrieval mode. They're the next guy's in a spot to come up with pucks. I forget what goal was the game the third goal against Edmonton against us to make it 3-0. They had a missed shot, but Nugent Hopkins was in the spot where Edmonton wanted him to be, and he scores the goal at the side of the net. It wasn't a lucky play. That's Edmonton. Those are the things that Yogi picks up on that I love, and it kind of gets me excited for having a young guy like that throwing ideas to me.
First of all, I love how excited Coach Tocchet is.
He sounds very excited, doesn't he?
To talk hockey again.
Yeah.
Frankly, there's a part of me that thinks Rick Tocchet likes being a head coach in the NHL because he gets to talk to media every day about hockey.
Yeah. They're going to sign. They're going to sign a guy in the ECHL. He's like, let's do a presser on it. Let's do a presser.
Can we do a Zoom? Really like this kid. I'm excited. No, because we love the answers. They're big, they're detailed, they're honest, and I love that one. They are birds of a feather. He noticed players seeking Yogi out to work on their games. When he's given projects, he completes them quickly. He's big on the subtleties of the game, like body positioning and how to win on the walls, like Coach, and on areas of improvement vis-a-vis the power play. Got to work more downhill on that power play, which, frankly, Jeff and Patrick and everybody we've talked to all season long is, man, I wish there were more downhill on the power play. Yogi was on that.
But statistically and analytically slanted, too. Like he basically said, I mean, he's almost like an analytics guy.
Right.
In his coaching style, which is good. I mean, I don't think you're going to get a coach that's fully analytics, and you don't want that. I think you want a guy that's got a feel as well. But it sounds like he's saying that Yogi's got a lot of evidence-based analysis as well.
So let's hear from Coach Tocchet on power play responsibilities, of which Yogi will have a big chunk.
I think Yogi's going to have to take a big chunk. I've liked the way he's come up with some new ideas. I see the workability he is with the Millsies and Huggy and Petey and Lindholm, all these guys, Garland. They trust him. I see the interaction with that. So I think that's important when you have a guy that's going to handle, a system on your team. But saying that, I mean, it's on me. I mean, I got to make sure that I'm involved. And, to me, it really comes with the connectability with these guys, of being more connected. It's not really, I don't really believe it's about plays, and it's not about, I think we have to teach it a little different way. I think we're going to have to be a little bit more strict on disciplines of a power play, retrievals, more of a downhill approach, being willing to play a different spot at times. I think these are things that we got to improve on. I think we got a little bit of a dose of that in Game 7 with that 4-minute power play. It wasn't connected, and I think we all know that. And it's on me to make these guys connected. And I think adding a Yogi, who's very enthusiastic, has a lot of great ideas with the Twins, and obviously with Sergei's knowledge of helping me run it in Pittsburgh, I think we have a lot of hands on deck. But there'll be a couple guys taking the lion's share of it, and make sure that these guys are connected when we start the year, and get throughout the year.
And again, a good answer there, or at least particularly with regards to taking accountability for everything that went wrong with the power play. But we're going into a second season now without a dedicated power play coach. When he talks about Yogi taking a big chunk of it, he's going to be involved. And it's not to say the committee approach can't work. It can. It is a little bit of different dynamic when somebody's ass is on the line, when that is clearly your responsibility, right? Like Adam Foote now on the penalty kill, it's on you now, Footer. Whereas that's not wholly the case here with Svejkovský. And I guess the other thing that surprises me, Blake, with regards to this hire of Yogi and this sort of patchwork coaching staff that he's put together with Gonchar as a part-time guy, and now the Sedins with more responsibility, and we'll get to that answer in the Sedins, the Twins roles in a second. It just surprises me that for someone who is as old and been around the league as Rick Tocchet has, I mean, he's 60 years old now. He's been in the league around the NHL 40 years. Who is clearly a gregarious guy, a fun-loving guy, a social guy, that he doesn't I'm sure he's got legions of friends and colleagues and peers around the league. And I'm just a little bit surprised as the third-time head coach that Tocchet hasn't been firmer on, I know who I want to hire. That's the guy. I know what I want to give to him in terms of roles and responsibilities. Like, oftentimes, some of these guys have arrangements.
Well, I think he did do that the first time around, though, with Foote and Gonchar coming in. I think that was
in terms of rounding out a staff, that he didn't fully round out the staff with that. I mean, oftentimes you will have assistant coaches who, they have arrangements with other assistant coaches. If you become a head coach, you're going to hire me. If I become a head coach first, I'm going to hire you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like any of that has happened here with Tocchet, maybe outside of Adam Foote.
I think he may well have that guy in his back pocket, but I think having experienced what he experienced this year, I think he saw other things for him. And he's got two Hall of Famers beside him in the Sedins that are just sitting there too.
But I would have thought this was the time to bring in the back pocket guy. You've been there a year and a half. Okay, I've retained some holdovers. I've hired part of the staff. Now it's my full program, my guys, my allegiances, and that hasn't happened here.
But things change, right?
And we're going to hear from him here in a second as to maybe a reason why, with regards to Jim Rutherford and a desire to promote from within. The other thing I wonder is whether or not the budget is there. That, he's been discouraged from going down that road, either financially or just as part of upper management's preferred program.
I think they probably saved some money here. Yo's a very experienced assistant.
Right.
So, I mean, I think you could.
I sure hope that's not one of the driving.
No, but I'm saying you probably could have gone to a Tocchet back pocket guy that doesn't have a ton of experience as part of his gang. Mm-hmm. You probably don't have to pay him what Yo was making. You probably could have saved money regardless if that was the right guy.
So the Twins are going to get more involved. Let's hear from Rick Tocchet on the expanded responsibilities for Henrik and Daniel Sedin.
Yeah, I think one of them will come on the road with us, whether it's between him or Sergei. So we'll have another hands on deck here and eyes for us. So one of them, if it's a 4-game road trip, one of them will come on for us with Sergei as being the other guy. So we'll be covered there. Obviously, still be part of the power play, and be involved in that. They were more on the second unit. So I think that I'm going to use their knowledge even more. And I think they're more comfortable to even dive into it more. For the same thing, team systems, they're starting to understand what I want. I think for me, it's that they're going to take a little bit of a bigger chunk, and I think they feel comfortable doing that now. Before, I think they like coming along slowly, and I think that they're willing to take a little bit more bite of the apple for us to say.
Not only the systems of Rick Tocchet, but I also just think voice. Period. The Sedins needed to realize what being a coach felt like, and now they've got that too.
Question for you: is bigger chunk going to be the new big summer? Love the answer. To your point, Blake, speaks so much to who we know Daniel and Henrik are.
Yeah.
There's no ego there. That these are two guys who drop into coaching and, believe it or not, don't think just because they played 1,000 NHL games, they've got that role all figured out.
Completely.
There's a lot of guys who make it to the Hockey Hall of Fame or fall well short of that, but think they have everything figured out because they played in the league. It's a much different gig.
Number 99, most prominently.
Most prominently. Arizona Coyotes were a horrible team with Wayne Gretzky on the bench.
Yeah.
And then Dave Tippett took over, who knew what he was doing, and they got better.
And to your previous point, Matt, about entourage, bringing in entourage guys,
well,
Wayne brought in
entourage makes it sound.
You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Yes, Tocchet was part of the.
But Wayne did that. But Wayne did that too with Ulf and Rick and all those guys too, right? So he may just say, "Hey, I can see these guys know how to do the job."
Yeah. And that they're more comfortable with his system is great.
Yep.
Incidentally, we talked yesterday about how NFL teams have now gone to the assistant tight ends coach and the safeties coach who's different than the DBs coach. The Sedin's coaching power play too. That's very much in the same realm, is it not?
The backup to the assistant to the regional manager. Yes. Basically what it is.
Now, here's the other thing. Oh, and incidentally, Tocchet says he does want to replace the skills coach position that Yogi Svejkovský was handling the last few years, because
which is interesting because I thought they were just going to try and again save money,
right?
Have him be in both.
And
that's not it.
And I do almost wonder whether it's like, okay, we'd like you to promote from within this guy, okay, but we're replacing that role. I do sort of wonder whether that was the conversation because, and again, this is very well explained. You want a guy back here in Vancouver when the team is on the road working with the injured players. That's important.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And they were lucky this year. They didn't have a huge group of guys back here left behind injured until the end of the season, but you never know when that's going to rear its head, and you need somebody back here minding the shop.
And as for going out and finding, a more credentialed or a more permanent or one of his guys, Tocchet said they looked a little bit outside the organization, but said Rutherford in particular is big on promoting from within.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the other thing. The Jack Adams winner, the reigning, is heading into the final year of his contract. And he was asked about that as well. Take a listen.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. We haven't talked. I have a great relationship with Patrick and Jim. I'm not worried about it. I'm really honestly focused on this year. I think that's important that those things will take care of itself down the road. I got to focus on this year. And I really, honestly, I don't think of that stuff. When there's the time to talk, we'll talk. But right now, it really is about me getting myself ready, recharging my battery, getting ready for this upcoming year.
We hear often when a coach does go into the final year about some of the issues it can cause. Do you believe any of those things can be a problem if we get to that?
I don't think so. I think with Roddy Brindamore, he did it. It didn't affect their team that much. I don't really think it really bothers anybody. To be honest with you, I don't think that the players know who I am. We have a great relationship. It's not going to change their mind going into this year, so I'm not worried about it.
And look, I can understand why he's not worried about it now. And really, there are a few things about this situation that would be different than your average Bear going into his final year of his contract. Number one, just the command and presence that Rick Tocchet has. He is most clearly an authority figure. And I don't necessarily see that diminishing all that much, particularly in the shadow of a Jack Adams award-winning
There's a butt coming, isn't
season. Well, if you lose, if you lose,
and there's a ton of change
it
coming.
is possible a lot of those goals, 1-goal games and games that went the Canucks' way early in the season do not go their way, then suddenly becomes an issue.
Yeah, and that to me is the key here, is that this is a team that has the potential for some change, has the potential for some, a real different look to it. What if it doesn't work out? What if they miss the playoffs next year? Now you could intellectually point to the reasons why that would happen. I think should it happen, and it probably wouldn't have a whole lot to do with coaching per se. It probably means that so and so all had down years, and that's why it happened. But the question really is, how much does the Coach of the Year season give you in terms of leash in this particular case? And I think the answer is a pretty decent amount of leash.
The other thing is, I do firmly believe him that the relationship with Alvin and Rutherford is good, and that this will get resolved in time. What I think has happened here is clearly the owner, who, of course, is most to blame for the Boudreau fiasco, doesn't want to be paying coaches not to coach. And so is a little bit chilled by the way things went down with the quick transition from Green to Boudreau to Tocchet, and all of a sudden you're paying all these coaches. This is an easy bone that management can throw the owner and say, hey, we'll get Tocchet done later. And you go to Rick and you say, Rick, paid Boudreau out, he paid Green out, give us some time on this.
Yeah.
But needless to say, you're the Jack Adams Award winner. You're going to be re-signed. At least you're going to be offered.
Yes.
And I hope that offer is commensurate with what a head coach of this quality should make. And honestly, that was as good a coaching job as any of these high-paid guys have done.
We've seen Coach of the Year candidates and or winners get turfed a year later. I don't think that's the case here, where this team is in its cycle. I think he's bought himself a year's grace, whether there's a contract here or not. It's a team option. I'm going to bet dollars to donuts that team option gets picked up.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's the other thing. That's, in fact, perhaps the most important thing. With the team option, it's a peace of mind for the team at the very least, if not for the coach. I think it still behooves them to pick up the option on the eve of the season and leave no doubt. But if this one lingered, this one would be a little more understandable than your typical lame duck.
Yeah.
How about this? Ian McIntyre of Sportsnet. Amid Canucks coaching news the last couple of weeks, there has been significant traction in contract talks with UFA's Nikita Zadorov and Elias Lindholm. Maybe neither resigns, but it's possible the Canucks could keep both players. Dan Milstein, agent to Nikita Zadorov, has quote tweeted that, calling it fake news. Well, and I'm inclined to believe Dan here, because Ian has been a bit of a diarist for Canucks management since moving to Rogers from the Vancouver Sun. I mean, I'm still waiting on the definitive piece about the calamity that was Jim Benning and owner elbows deep in hockey ops, which you had a front row seat to and didn't ever write about. It was always going to work out. Milstein's comment dovetails with what Dollywall's reported and others, that things just aren't looking great for a Zadorov reunion right now.
And you can
term is the big thing. Nikita mentioned that specifically to IMAC last week in what was a very good piece about a man in search of a country after he's criticized Vladimir Putin and can't go back to Russia. And you can also understand the hesitancy on the part of the Vancouver Canucks to go too deep onto term or just too deep onto any contract negotiations with Zadorov when you don't yet know what's going on with Roenick.
You can pick apart the writer's past anyway, recent works, all you want. But at the same time, this comes from somewhere. Like, he doesn't just write this column
That's what I think. I think he's the preferred outlet when they're trying to tempt things and, make things look rosier.
My point is that the team, the team is in his ear saying we're close on these two guys? Like, again, it comes from somewhere.
Well, not close, but significant traction.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the team is in his ear.
Of course it's the team. Yeah.
But I don't know what they have to gain by that, Matt, because if it's nowhere near the truth and the players end up walking, it just sounds like they didn't have a grasp of reality. Like what are you trying to get out there?
I think you're trying to counter the doom and gloom around Zadorov here this week.
I don't know. To me, it makes you look worse if you don't bring home Zadorov ultimately, because you've raised hopes that there was traction.
People have short memories.
Well, it's also the early June. I don't think there's a huge crush of fan sentiment that you've got to tamp down right now. I just don't think it's at a high. It's just a weird thing, weird timing.
And like Lindholm is interesting in and of itself. Set Zadorov aside for a second.
Yeah.
Even if you were going to overpay, like go beyond market rate for Elias Lindholm, he's come back here to play third line center. So
yeah,
it doesn't pass the common sense test.
Yeah, you're not putting the $11.5 million guy in the third line.
No.
Nor are you likely to make him a winger.
No. He's a terrific two-way centerman.
Yeah. So
and JT has more than proved he can play the middle.
Yeah.
So I just don't get that one either. I think he's getting played here.
It's unlikely in both cases. I think most people believe that those are the two players that are least likely to be back amongst the Canuck group. So,
yeah,
curious, very curious.
Rutherford has done this before. He did in Pittsburgh, he did in Carolina. Preferred outlets, going to try and steer the coverage my way via this guy.
Yeah.
It was quite a shitting match in Pittsburgh, actually, as I understand it.
And Dan Milstein is under no obligation to even correct the news.
No.
Like, he could just sit back and go, that's wrong, and just have his day go on. He seemed ultra motivated to make sure.
He seemed quite motivated.
Which is interesting.
I mean, Ian tweets at 11:14. Milstein at 11:39 is quote tweeting it with fake news.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And look, much can change in contract negotiations. One party moves off their position. But for the moment, I'm more inclined to believe Milstein on this than McIntyre.
Well, one is
intimately involved.
Yes, one is an agent in the process. One is not. Yes.
Yeah.
And this isn't the first time we've seen teams, agents use the media to try to gain leverage through the public's eye.
But again, I don't even. But and I would totally agree with that. If there was leverage here to be gained for the Vancouver Canucks, it doesn't sound like there's even much of a negotiation happening with Nikita Zadorov and Lindholm. It sounds like they are resigned to just losing the players. So that's my curiosity is I don't even know that there's a negotiation play here.
And Blake, to your question, what's to be gained? They can come back later. We gave it our best shot. We gave it our best shot on Nikita. We just couldn't make it happen. We know he's beloved by you, the fan and customer. We gave it our best shot. We just couldn't get it.
If I'm trying to guide public sentiment.
And we made a lot of traction. You remember the McIntyre? We made a lot of traction there that first week in June.
You see, if I'm guiding the messaging there, I'm saying, no, guys, we play this as we've made a hard decision. And we've made a decision that we're not going down that road rather than we tried really hard and lost. Like make it a decision by you. That looks a lot better.
Well, and that may well be the narrative if and when they lose them.
Yeah. We had a change of hearts.
They're not obliged,
yes.
right?
No, for sure.
There's no one named or connected in this McIntyre tweet. So, that's what he's reporting. We drew a hard line. Am I the only one who watched I'm Just Here for the Riot doc, which debuted in Canada on TSN last night?
I may get around to it. I lived it. I don't know that I need to relive it, but I might get to it.
Grady?
Didn't jump on it quick.
Yeah. Oh,
I was
if I stumble on
I
it,
was
I'll
looking
probably
forward
watch
to.
it.
I love sports documentaries, and I know this one was going to be a difficult watch. But I love sports documentaries, and I particularly love documentaries about our sports, our city, our teams here in Vancouver, which brings us to the welcome mat.
Let's get into it. I don't know if it was malicious. Probably not. But I do know it was another WTF moment. My question of ownership would be, was it worth it? And the architect, and I use that term loosely, given there wasn't much architecture, more finger painting with this team. It's like the running of the Bulls in Pamplona. You know someone is going to get hurt. That's what you all need to understand here, right now.
So I'm just here for the Riot, the new documentary. Catch Amy, one of the co-filmmakers here, also did the Grizzly Truth documentary. You may remember from a few years back what happened to the Grizzlies. And this documentary, once you get through the preamble, the scene set of, Vancouver being this pristine, lovely town on the edge of the Pacific and teams never won, Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final. The next 15, 20, 30 minutes, it just destroyed me. Brought back that pit in my stomach from June 15th, 2011. The one that lingered there for several days after June 15th, 2011. Seeing so many familiar sights in the middle of just grotesque public violence, it just stirred something within. The orange glow, the lighting, cars on fire. I mean, it just had such an evil specter. It looked like a war zone. And that's what good documentaries do. They move you in one way or another. And I was very much moved emotionally, even if that emotion was negative. What I hated about those opening scenes is not just that they happened, but that they perpetuate the reputation of Canucks fans, especially after the Luke Gastic rant earlier this week. And it's really unfair, given that a large majority of Vancouver Canucks fans aren't rioters and don't spew online garbage. But we're also the only city with 2 Stanley Cup riots on our resume, and that's something we're going to have to live with for a long time, and that's a topic well worth exploring in doc form. Kat Jamie brought up the question of our nature in the introduction of this film, and it was well explored throughout the hour and a half. In a lawless environment, how many of us would get swept up and indulge? What are the psychological effects of the quote-unquote mob mentality? And where do we draw the line, legally, criminally? The other good question that's asked in this doc, and I'd like your takes on this, did the cameras hurt or help the situation? Did the pull of performing for social media, because you remember, social media was a relatively new thing back then in 2011, did that aid and abet the destruction? Or did some of those cameras, the presence of them, stop others from joining in? Because she has she has, or they have in the film, different camera people. There's a global camera photojournalist in it, and there's another photojournalist in it, and one seems to think that the presence of him and his camera there affected the proceedings, that the more people that saw that camera, the more people wanted to mug for it. The other photojournalist talks about how they got assaulted, like, what are you doing? Get this camera out of there, because some in the mob realized what that could mean for them in terms of consequences.
See, I think those incidents, that riot and other world events, have sculpted since then how we picture that.
Right.
And I think that was still so early in the smartphone era.
It's called the first riot of the smartphone era.
Right.
They make mention of that in the film.
It was so early in the smartphone era and still relatively early in the social media era that I don't think people had the 2 + 2 = 4 mentality of what was going down there.
Wow. Right down to the point, like, where police were combing Tumblr. Like it's the first time I've heard Tumblr. in
Tumblr.
many
That was like
years.
a Giphy, wasn't it? Was that
I
like
guess. Yeah.
very crude sort of
And,
Instagram.
and even, you look at some of the shots they have of the screens, very crude looking web pages compared to what you see now.
Right. And
Technology's come a long way in the
That's
intervening
right.
13 years.
for good and bad, for better and for worse. So
Mhm.
I do think that in today's social media and camera era, I think the cameras help.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
I think back then, I do think there was a little of column A and a little of column B.
And also we cameras weren't great on the phones these
No,
days.
they weren't. No, they weren't.
We've all got
They're a lot
4K in our hands
A
now.
lot better.
Like, you can zoom in on video now.
Yeah, Grady's coaching me up on 4K. Everything I got to do, every video I got to film in 4K.
So yeah, I think people would be a lot more careful.
It's a beautifully shot documentary. And of course, the smartphone video footage for days, right? I'm sure the cutting room floor replete with images. They could have easily ballooned the runtime on this thing. And that's another sign of a good doc, right? We did it in 90 minutes, but you should see what else we have.
Well, there's that great 9/11 documentary that has no narration, nothing. It's just clips.
Just clips of the police radio, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The parts about our city coming together, both shame, name, and prosecute the evildoers and clean up on the morning of June 16th. Let's not forget that. Lay citizens came out with brooms and soap and water and everything that was required to clean up the next day, take care of the city. And I'm so glad they included that in the documentary because the opening is just so jarring that you need a little chicken soup for the soul if you're a Vancouverite watching the early part of this documentary by the time you get to the part of the cleanup.
Well, and that's the surprising part of how we felt coming out of it. It's sort of like if your house got broken into and they stole like your little computer, your little speaker for your smartphone. And you're like, okay, nothing much was lost, but the incursion is the shaking part. You didn't lose anything monetarily, really, but the fact that somebody was in your home is what unsettles you.
Yep.
The fact that this was our home and we did this to ourselves, quote unquote. And again, there were some extra visitors here, but for the most part, a lot of Vancouverites did participate.
Oh, no question.
The fact that we were capable of doing this that was the most unsettling. Never mind the broken glass and the damage.
There's a good breadth of character in the film, lots of voices, competing viewpoints that gets one to think. In terms of omissions, I would have liked to have seen the police pressed a little more, given that the Cup riots, of course, had happened before. And Blake, you'll remember this. In the days and weeks that followed, there was a theory that organized anarchists were to blame for igniting the unrest. There was no exploration of that in the film. Do you remember? Yeah,
really?
Yeah. Do you remember? I mean, unless I missed it, I was for the most part paying attention. But you might remember the Canucks came out and instantly those were not our fans.
Yes.
Even though so many of them were in Canucks gear.
Yeah.
And in some cases, I think that was a theory by hockey people to excuse hockey people, as though you needed a good guy license to support the sport or the Canucks.
Yeah.
I think in other cases, it was political expediency in the ongoing battle of left versus right. It was those lefty anarchists.
Oh, and we still see that. It's deep state stuff.
Either way, I would have liked to have either had the doc put that boogeyman to bed or flesh it out a little further.
Right. It doesn't need to be the crux of the documentary.
By no means.
The mention of how many out-of-towners police arrested, just the mere mention of that
and
would have sufficed.
I was paying attention, but I don't have full recall of the 90 minutes. There may have been a line, a sentence, or something in there. But I didn't, I kept waiting for that. Like, oh, okay, are we going to hear about anarchists here, or are we going to hear about an organized effort or anything like that? And then you get to the final 15 minutes or so of the documentary. And I don't doubt that rioters who were outed on social media went through a different period online, and frankly, deservingly so. A lot of them say what I went through online is worse than the actual legal consequences that I faced. But there was an equivalency drawn between people who actually did physical harm and online trolls, and that got me furious. And I noticed this with Jamie's The Grizzly Truth doc. She seems to trade sympathy for access. Like in the Grizzly Truth doc, Stu Jackson and Steve Francis get her on side quickly. And I felt this doc was a little soft on the riders. One rider asked, have you never done anything wrong? Well, sure I have, as have many others. But how many have smashed windows, assaulted first responders, and lit police cruisers on fire?
Yeah. Yeah,
I haven't come anywhere close to doing something like that.
An equivalency issue there.
For sure.
Yeah.
And look, I realized it was going to be difficult to get these riders on camera, named, and talking about their actions and this period. I'm sure something they want to get through. But I just felt there was a little too much sympathy given to them. Like online shame and hate may be repugnant, but we're talking about words versus violent acts here. Throwing a Molotov cocktail, far worse than throwing an insult on Twitter.
And you know,
like we have free speech in this country, the right to riot, not protected.
Having regret for what you did is great, and all that. But like guys like Stu Jackson, you're trying to elicit sympathy. I have no doubt that Stu Jackson was a great guy.
No, he is a great guy. Everyone who's been around thinks him a great guy.
Right.
I met him a couple of times when I was covering the NBA. Superb guy.
But within the context of, you know, how did you build a team properly? Did you miss some clear off ramps where you guys could have gotten better? It's in the history books. Like it happens.
Yeah.
Whether you were nice or not.
Exactly. And my feelings on this score came to a crescendo when a Whistler mountain biker, a rider who got caught, lost all the sponsors. He actually instructs the audience, when you see someone doing something stupid, don't pull out your camera and film it. And I thought, are you fucking kidding me? That's how many of these crimes got solved that night. That's how many crimes today get solved.
Yeah. You take the veil off of this stuff.
That's the public oversight and scrutiny that helps the police, who were so clearly overmatched on that dreadful night in June.
Now you can make an argument. What do you do with that footage once you get it? Do you post it to Instagram or just send it to the police? You could make those sorts of arguments, but to say that, no, don't document.
Yeah, don't document somebody lighting a police cruiser on fire or smashing a window and looting.
Yeah.
Or punching a first responder. No, assaulting a first responder. And that comment went unchallenged. And that left me furious that the filmmakers would allow that one to dangle. But hey, I was moved emotionally.
Sometimes filmmakers,
even if irresponsibly, and I guess another sign of a good.
Sometimes filmmakers like to leave those questions just to dangle so that the viewer judges on their own, you know. But
sure,
but yeah,
I mean, to me, the next frame needed to be a police, like they have Jim Chu in the film.
Yeah,
the next needed to be Jim Chu going, no, that's exactly what we want as the police. You see something like that, and you got video of it, send it straight to us.
Yeah.
Anyways, it was a difficult watch, but a stirring watch. I'll give it that. And let's welcome out for today. We have feedback channel says follows on email live at sekeresprice.com. Contact 778-402-9680. It's the Great Clips text message inbox. Twitter, I'm at Sekeres, at Sekeres Price. Welcome at presentation of Northlands Golf Course. We're going to be out there today. Looking forward to it. 6 to 90 day reservations. Check it all out, golfnorthlands.com. Let's get to the menu today. We got Patrick Johnston coming up on a variety of topics, including Zadorov, including whether or not they should overpay for any of these free agents. We talked about Jonathan Lekramaki. And, of course, Rick Tocchet's new staff. Menu brought to you by Greta Bar, 50 West Cordova. Unbelievable spot. Pre-game, after the game, watch the game, and, of course, one of the great arcades in this city. Check them out, gretabar.com. Bet365 and our bets of the day. And yesterday I went NBA Finals. Boy, big sports weekend.
It is.
Yesterday I went NBA Finals. Tomorrow I may go Belmont Stakes. But for today, Lewis Hamilton, a long and illustrious history at the Canadian Grand Prix in Montreal. He got his first win there in 2007. It was also the first win ever by a person of color in Formula One. He's won it 7 times. That's tied with Michael Schumacher for the most ever. Now, his Mercedes is down this year. They're not great this year, but they weren't great last year either. And he finished third last year on guts and attrition and track knowledge. And I'm going to bet him to get back on the podium at El Notre Dame. Hamilton to finish third at the Canadian Grand Prix Sunday, in part because I looked at the odds you get for betting down the podium. Like, you're not going to bet first because Max Verstappen's likely going to win and there's no value there. But to bet second or to bet third, pretty good odds. Get Lewis to finish third at plus 2,000.
But you don't get to it's not like horse racing where if you bet bet to show you don't get to
no. Yeah, just third. He's got to finish just third. Fourth don't count, second don't count. If he wins the damn thing, I lose as well.
I'm going Stanley Cup final tomorrow, so I will go Lions today, and I'm willing to give up the points here, albeit on the road versus the Argonauts. I think it's a very good Lions team.
Yeah.
And I
think,
of course,
backup quarterback, or at least not the quarterback they intended to start in Toronto with Chad Kelly suspended.
That's right. And I think the Lions, I think all these ticket sales, and more on that coming up later in the show, I think they know the gravitas of this game, where every week it's a pretty big game. Yeah. You know, until they're home and cool, they've got 13, 14 wins in the bank. I think they're going to go into every week going, this is a big week. It's particularly the opener. Yeah. Obviously, you're up for it. Lions minus 5.5.
And you only play 18. They're all big games.
Yeah.
Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code VANBONUS altogether. All one word. Patrick Johnston is next.
In a season like this, you never want to miss a single second of what's happening on the ice, and you want to be around your fellow fans, right? Well, Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova, the perfect spot to do so. Hey, if you've got tickets, a great place to pre and post. They've got drink specials every single day. And if you don't have tickets, well, stick around and soak up the atmosphere with all your fellow fans, play all the great video games and air hockey, great air hockey setup as well at Greta Bar YVR. We'll see you there, 50 West Cordova.
Northlands Golf Course. Download the free app and book tee times with a touch of your thumb. And while you're on course, open the app for hole-by-hole GPS and track your score. 6 to 90-day reservations. Jump the queue. Lock in your date for $10 per player booking fee. Limited daily availability. Check it all out. golfnorthlands.com. Everybody knows about the overdose crisis, also known as the toxic drug crisis.
But what's less known is that the stigma around addiction makes it harder to ask for help.
And that's got to stop. Addiction is a complex health condition, not a choice.
Right, and that means people shouldn't have to face judgment at work or from their loved ones or fear the law.
But shame or stigma can cause a person to hide their drug use or use alone.
And we don't want that. People shouldn't be afraid to reach out.
There are supports available, and it helps to know where to start.
The government of BC is partnering with organizations like Sekeres Price to help extend this message throughout our province.
If you or someone you know is struggling, you can find supports and services near you at helpstartshere.gov.bc.ca. You can also watch powerful real-life stories of recovery on the Help Starts Here website.
The Vancouver Canadians are back at the Nat. Catch fireworks, giveaways, and Friday nooners all spring and summer long. Get your tickets at CanadiansBaseball.com.
Great Clips is the official hair salon of the National Hockey League. There are 37 salons in Vancouver and the Lower Mainland, all Canadian-owned and operated. Download the app and find the nearest to you. When you're up next for a cut, you'll get a ready next text. Great Clips. It's going to be great.
Great. How are you guys?
Very well.
Fabulous.
Sun is out. We're all wearing our hats. We're all taking care of the top of our heads. Very proud of you all.
Yes, exactly. That's why we're wearing hats, not because we're lazy and don't want to do our hair in the morning. Definitely.
What's hair?
I've started doing my hair from time to time.
I've noticed, yeah.
Breathe. Hair should breathe more often.
Mm-hmm.
When I wear the hats too much, the hair doesn't breathe enough.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
That's what's hurt
Plus,
Patrick and I.
Here's the other thing, Patrick.
In the past.
I'm nearly 50 years old, and I have all my hair.
Oh, listen. Okay.
We're very proud of you.
puts me in stark contrast to many of my peers.
So it's a flex. Let's see.
What can you tell us about Nikita Zadorov?
Well, just crickets, I think. Term, I think, a big sticking point. And as I think I said last week, like, why wouldn't this guy look out the front door anyway? It had a huge playoff. He is massive. He ticks off so many boxes that teams are going to want just visually. Now, obviously, there is the rest of the story that people pay attention to in terms of analytics and that, but big character guy. He's a player, I think, that showed himself well, did everything he could in his favor in the playoffs. So even if he were interested in staying, and clearly he likes Vancouver. Everyone says that. He said that. I think everyone says that. We saw him go golfing with Murph and JT Miller the other day. His kids are in school here, or his kid is in school here. Yeah, I think the Canucks are certainly hopeful. I think that comfort level and that desire to live here makes a difference. It's made a difference with other players, but in the end, sounds like things are pretty quiet right now.
Everybody workshopping this deal has said 5 years, that blah, blah, blah. So he just turned 29. You certainly don't sign, or I wouldn't sign anybody with their age starting with a 3 to any super long-term deals unless you're a superstar. He just turned 29. Would you consider a 7, probably not an 8, but a 7-year deal for Zadorov?
I mean, that's a lot to pay for a third pairing defenseman, right? That's the thing to remember here, is that as loud and exciting he is he going to play more than Carson Soucy? He's certainly not going to play more than Quinn Hughes. And, Soucy is not tied up for anything close to that long. And do you see a succession plan? I don't think that's the guy. I enjoy his game. I think he was perfectly slotted for how they used him, especially in the playoffs. So, yeah, committing that long. Listen, if you can get him for that long on $2 million a year, great. But I don't think that's happening.
That's not happening.
There's a long-standing argument you should commit to those guys at low rates because then you can flex around the rest of it. But even the Jay Beagle story, of course, $4 million, 4 years, like that was absurd. Those guys in that range, as loud as exciting as they may be, is not where you should be investing your long-term commitments.
Can I take something on with both of you?
Sure.
Always.
Yeah, I'm
looking forward to this.
It's almost a weekly occurrence here with Patrick now. Calling him a third pair defenseman.
Well, was he not? What was he, Matthew?
He played 20 minutes and 9 seconds per game in the postseason. That was third amongst Canucks defensemen after Hughes and Roenick.
Sure.
That was a full 3 minutes plus more than Carson Soucy.
I'm comfortable with him playing as much as Carson Soucy, for sure. I am.
Well, so that's my point here. Are we not talking about a guy who jumped Carson Soucy in the postseason and became their second pair?
I mean, Carson Soucy's only a $3.2 million defenseman. I think the Canucks are allowed to and probably will have to sign a defenseman this year, probably on the right side. But you know what I mean? Yeah. Who's going to make more than $3.2 million? Like $3.2 million is not a lot as your third most paid defenseman.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. Look at the regular season. They were pretty equivalent in terms of, right? They leaned on Zadorov because he was playing great. Like, absolutely. You're totally right, Matt. Like, in the end, in crunch time, they leaned on him heavy. It worked out great. But in the regular season, that was not the story. And your baseline is what you need to remember, not the big, huge, exciting moment, but the baseline. I mean, if you're paying a guy for his playoffs, I mean, that is the point. That's what I think he's going to try to do. But the baseline here was a guy that was pretty good in the regular season, but had some moments. And I think realistically, at the trade deadline, weren't 100% committed to because they were trying to make other things happen. I don't think they were actively trying to get rid of him, but I don't think he was a guy they're saying that they wouldn't stay or that they were going to hold on to if that meant, say, I don't know, getting Chris Tanev, right? Like there were other things they were trying to make happen. They liked him, but in the end, it played out well for him and obviously played out well for the Canucks in the moment, but in the long run, it's going to be a different story, I think.
Yeah, Soucy played 17 minutes and 29 seconds per game in the regular season. Zadorov played 17:04. Soucy's ice time actually went down in the playoffs, dipped below 17 minutes, whereas Zadorov's shot skyward.
The other thing to consider, guys, is just should they spend every cent that everybody wants to spend on Nikita Zadorov? Should they spend that on Brett Pesce? And
that's it.
And overpay on the right side to make sure you're settled for your top four at the very least.
Well, you'd be paying for a guy that's a year older than Phil Hronek. It depends on what you do with Hronek. Like I have no sense of. I thought for a while they weren't. We talked about this before. Hronek obviously has a skill set that helps, but if they could find an alternative, I do think they would like to try to do that. And Pesce, who is a bigger defenseman, a right shot defenseman, roughly the same age, not as necessarily offensively skilled, but still pretty handy with the puck. I just having seen Tocchet work and what his preferences are, I think he'd rather have a larger guy with Quinn Hughes than two little guys playing together. That's, I think, the overall philosophy. Whether it's right or wrong, that's what I think they're looking at. Which is why they in the end, what they were hoping to get from Zadorov and what they got in the playoffs from Zadorov was to their satisfaction. That's what they want.
We asked yesterday on our poll question, if you're going to overpay for one of these free agents, who are you overpaying for? Hronek, Joshua, Zadorov, or just flat refuse to overpay? What do you think the Canucks will do, and what would you do?
I mean, I think that's a fantastic question. I like how you framed it too. I mean, to me, I think you said Hronek for you, right? And which the overpay on Hronek is probably, in relative terms, is not the same as say an overpay on Joshua. But then again, Joshua's not signed for long term. I've made it pretty clear. I think Joshua of that group is the guy that you really want to bring back, just because of the age. Because of the sort of the curve you've seen, but also realistically, you're probably not having to sign him for too long a term. Term is a question on all these guys. Hronek's offensive skill set, I think we know that first half of the season, there was a reason why he put up so many points. It wasn't just that he was playing with Quinn Hughes. That said, he struggled when he got injured, and I think you can see why you might want to look at somebody else for the overall context I mentioned before. What do you want your pair to look like? It doesn't have to be Chris Tanev, but you would like a guy that plays a similar way, can move the puck in a similar way, has sort of the same baseline skill set as Hronek. You don't necessarily worry about the production. I think in the end, you'd rather not overpay for anybody, but you're probably in the circumstances going to have to accept that some guys that you want to keep or you're going to sign from elsewhere are going to go for more than you might have budgeted, just because there's more money in the system this summer. Just there are so many teams with cap space, and the cap's going up, right? Like that's the biggest thing. The Canucks are actually one of the teams with the most space to work with, but they're not alone in having, was it 26 million? Like there's a bunch of teams that are in that range. They have to do a fair bit of work. Like I think they know that their lineup may look very different next year. But it's not impossible. It's not like, they're not like the Oilers who have $10 million and 8 guys to sign and on and on and on.
And the other thing, Peach, is this summer you have to account for the Utah club because they're going to spend.
Yeah, exactly.
Arizona never used to. Chicago still has tons of space, and they're
the Venom. The Venom are going to spend.
So Chicago, and San Jose. So you have teams out there that are bad that are going to spend on top of the cap space that other teams have on top of the cap going up. So no, you're quite right. I think it's going to be a very competitive marketplace, and I don't begrudge these agents or players at all for saying, no, I'm going to go to free agency and see what the market bears, because I have a feeling that some of those contracts are going to come in way over and above what the final offer was from their existing clubs.
The thing that interests me just on that point about Utah is that Arizona for so long, I think, was kind of seen as this safety valve dumping ground. And they would absorb a certain amount of league-wide mistakes just because they were required to carry players and have a cap hit.
They're like the Caymans. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They were the Cayman Islands of the NHL. Exactly. Yeah. And that's not going to be it anymore. There isn't a team like that right now. There are teams with cap space. Obviously, San Jose and Utah literally spring to mind. Chicago, but those are all teams that claim to have a plan and claim to actually be trying to win and not just pretend that we're building for the future. No, you're cutting salary because your owner doesn't have any money. Like, we're not living in that universe, at least not right now, as far as I know of any other team in the NHL. Alex Morello gets to sit in the corner and be an AHL owner. With that in mind, not that I think Patrick Allvin's a guy that has been looking for ways out the way Jim Benning used to, or other managers like that. But I do think certainly here they're going to be conscious of the fact that there really is no room for error, that you have to nail every one of these signings.
12 teams, so more than a third of the league have 20 million or more in cap space. And we should shout Columbus too, because Saravelli tells us he thinks Columbus is going to get active, not to mention Buffalo with 23 million in cap space and having to finally take the next step. There's a lot of lurkers there.
The Canucks probably won't buy out, but we were talking about this yesterday. Do teams buy out players because they've got the cap space now too? They can absorb it a little bit and it saves them money down the road.
Yeah, like McKay, it's not a nightmare, but I don't think you want two buyouts sitting on your cap.
No,
whatever it is, structure.
Yeah. I was looking at Jack Campbell at Edmonton. It's an easy buyout, actually. And
I think that's one that, like, you look at all the variables that Edmonton's facing, and it's hard to imagine them not doing that. But Edmonton just has nothing to work with. Like, there's no space, and they have, Connor Brown, and there's the Connor Brown. I know people are probably tired of hearing about Edmonton, but Connor Brown's got the overage, and that's going to be a cap penalty, and they got a bunch of decisions to make there, and not a lot of stuff underneath right now. They're kind of it's a familiar, although obviously their top end's amazing. There are things that are going to happen. I think things are going to be active, whether it's just standing back. You don't even need to talk to anybody. You just sit back and look at the system, the way the system's set up. There's a lot of room for movement. Teams that are going to want to maybe reshuffle their makeup. Trading Phil Hronek isn't easy because of that, the arbitration thing. But if that's something they're going to do, like I think, but I'm not certain it's something they're going to do. How they make up their blue line is going to be really interesting to watch. And I wrote about this last week. And Zadorov, Hronek, obviously top of the list, but it sounds like Ian Cole's going to walk, and they'd like to bring Myers back. But they need to think long and hard about what their defense core was. Why it was pretty good last year, worked pretty well. And if you're going to try to sort of reset that, you need to keep that in mind as well. And it's not going to be an easy task given the competition.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful chaos coming.
Yeah. Have you noted how much of the free agent question also overlaps with the special teams question? When you look at all the penalty killing forwards who are free agents, not to mention defensemen, although I think is coming back. And then, of course, a big one on the power play side, where if no Lindholm, then, what to do there.
Yeah. I mean, that was an obvious thing that obvious item that they need to figure out, that essentially Bo Horvat replacement. It wasn't really Kuzmenko. It was really Bo Horvat. Yeah. We needed to find a trigger man in there, in the bumper. PK, Teddy Bluger is also free agent. Ian Cole was he not the number one penalty killing time guy? By the way, Rick Tocchet scooping me on the radio this morning. I had heard that Adam Foote would be running the PK, but and a big task for him, right? Like a guy who's come a long way, who a year and a half ago was not in the NHL, had never stood on an NHL bench. And as Tocchet told me mid-season, had developed 1,000,000% as a coach in just 8 or 9 months, 10 months, and now he's going to have to help this team figure out how to PK, which obviously came a long way over the season. We're league average, but in the end held the Oilers to serve, right? I mean, the Canucks in the end lost the special teams battle, not because their PK failed, but because their power play couldn't score. Right? Like that in many ways is the story of that series. And that's why the Oilers beat the Stars. The Oilers shut down the Stars power play. So getting the Canucks' PK to at least where it was this year, and if not better, is a huge task for Foot. And
do you buy the theory now that the PK is more important than the PP in the power play?
No, well,
in the playoffs.
No, I think in the end, scoring goals is what matters, right? Like, look at the Oilers. The reason why the Oilers are where they are is because their offense kept running, right? Like the Canucks slowed down their power play, but at the end of the day, the Oilers are just scoring goals in bunches, and they've scored goals in bunches since the end of November, and that's more than anything what matters the most. Like people inside the game will tell you that goaltending is, you figure out what you can. Woodley will tell you can figure out everything. But you set your defensive structure as best you can. But at the end of the day, scoring goals is what matters. And that's what teams are focused on and how to make it happen. And that's what I think Rick Tocchet's going to be thinking about all summer.
Look at the long history of the Stanley Cup and who wins. It's typically really good offensive teams.
Yeah.
Occasionally an airtight defensive team breaks through and win, but more often than not, it's teams that can score goals, which is, why that's sort of the next level of coaching. You can, talk about how you're a systems guy and an identity guy and hard to play against and goal prevention. And that's the essence of what your job is as a head coach. Completely right.
Yeah.
But even if you put, as you say, or as Kevin says, you put all that into place, it still may not be enough.
I just saw the Bill Torrey quote today, and any coach can make somebody play defense. Only God can make a score.
Well, I'd say to some degree. So,
with that in mind, PJ, is it wrong for the Canucks to have even small hopes that Jonathan Lekkerimäki makes this team? Like, should they just put that out of their minds, or is it reasonable that a 20-year-old can come in and win a spot on this team?
It's totally reasonable, whether he is ready to do it, because he's not, in the end, he's a guy that figured it out finally playing against men last year in the SHL. The defensemen are bigger in the NHL, and they're just better at it. And I think that is the fascinating challenge in the big picture for him, period, of whether he's going to make it or not. Canucks, of course, believe that he will. But he's not a big kid.
But you're not going to hope that he comes in and scores 35 next year. I think you're hoping he comes in and has a Hoglander season, something like that.
Where are you playing him? Like, I mean, I guess if they're so weak at winger, you can drop him in the top 6. Is that the idea?
Oh, yeah.
Because you're not scoring in the bottom.
In the long run, he's got to be there. So, this is the thing, right? Like, risk is the game, right? You have to be willing to give the kids a chance, but you have to also know that the kid is ready. So if the kid's not ready, you don't give, it's not going to work. So the question is he ready? Is he physically strong enough to deal with the wear and tear that is required of playing his position in the NHL, which is a goal scorer, a guy who needs to get to the net, needs to get inside. Like, listen, Brock Besser is not the tallest guy, but he's big. He's a strong kid, right? Like, is Jonathan Lekkerimäki ready? Has he put on enough muscle? I stood next to him in the food line, the media meal pregame, I think game 7. And, he's a well-built kid, but he's still a kid. And it's it is a big step from the AHL to the NHL, and certainly the Canucks would love it. I mean, I know the Canucks definitely need him, and certainly Elias Pettersson, the defenseman, and they hope for Tom Willander to break into this lineup in the next couple of seasons because of the cap. Like, those guys are going to be cheap deals. They need them in there. There's simply no other way for them to really sustain this window without those guys being ready and being able to step in. Is Lekkerimäki going to be ready at training camp? I have no idea. But certainly we've seen stories in the past of players who were ready, needed a half year in the AHL, and then they step in, and by the second half of the season, they're ready to go. And I think at the end of the day, that's the most likely path here, that they certainly would hope that he's ready to go in the second half.
Be gobsmacked if he played well in the early part of the season. It's not only a big step from the Swedish League to the NHL, but for a winger in this system, it is entirely different on the small ice. So I would think, if anything, Lekkerimäki is a second half guy. Which brings us to the staff, or at least the previous discussion got us off to Lekkerimäki. So what do you make of everything they've done here?
Well, I mean,
do you understand it? And, like, what are the reasons behind it? Like, what's wrong with the head coach and 2 primary full-time assistants, model that a lot of teams have?
It's not nothing. I mean, this is the thing that the thing I thought a lot about this season was, people kept, look how many coaches on the ice. I'm like, good, like this is where you should be. The evolution. I mean, I think there's a lot of parts to this, and so just bear with me. But there's the evolution of how they think about development and coaching needs, and assignments. So, the Sedins, their original notion was to sort of learn about how it works, learn a bit about coaching, develop, figure out how to talk to players and what matters and this kind of stuff. And originally, kind of just in Abbotsford, then this year was kind of a bit of everywhere. By the playoffs, apparently, one of them would be on the road helping out. We did see Sergei Gonchar when he was here fairly often was the eye in the sky guy. They're evolving parts. And then beyond that, I mean, part of it's the Chris Higgins story. Chris Higgins is, not involved in development because I guess in the end, he was part of the old sort of setup, and they've really dialed in on how Michael Samuelson and Mike Komisarek are working, and how they are engaging with players, and to a degree, Marco Terenius, because he's the goalie coach in Abbotsford, but also working with some of the kids. And just sort of seeing how the roles and responsibilities were going to flesh around. And at the end of the day, the Sedins ready to take on new tasks, and you learn more about what they're able to do and what they're ready to do. And I have no doubt that's some of the story here. Mike Yeo, the thing that's interesting in all this was Mike Yeo, they made him an offer, right? It wasn't a huge offer, but they made him an offer. They were interested enough in the coach to keep him. And he went for basically more security in Ottawa. Yeo was clearly a solid NHL coach. As we said, I think last week, assistant coaches change all the time. They once you reach a certain standard, you're in it, but you're not necessarily always going to be in the same team. So from that standpoint, it did surprise me that they haven't brought anybody in. I mean, this is talk. It's kind of second go around. Here's a guy who thinks endlessly about how his staff works and how things move around and how things evolve. And so the fact that they are down a guy, I mean, I guess they'll hire a new skills coach, a guy who's a specialist, does a lot of, I mean, Svejkovský was on the ice all the time. It wasn't like he wasn't part of this coaching staff, right? Like he was on the ice here more than I expected he would be, because originally the idea was that he was going to be on the ice in Abbotsford a lot. But he was a guy that clearly built a rapport and runs practices. You can see he knows skills. Like he definitely knows that. And
they
so it makes sense.
Systems too, more than just skills too. So
yeah, that's what I mean. Like he's been in this game. Like he's been studying and paying attention to hockey for a long time. So yeah, adding him to the staff, yeah, it makes sense. And there is a bit of that mentality of upwards, building upwards and finding new roles for people that are inside your own house, and you work from below and bring them up. So, there in a way is how it's worked out with him. It still surprises me because a lot of it does still, like the Carleton thing and the fact that he was a guy that they lauded and were so in favor of, and then clearly it came down to money, and Yeo got more term, and Rick Tocchet is on a year plus a team option, and I mean it's obviously a business, and so you think about that, but you still can't help but think about the sort of money, and these are the detail parts of running the business that do matter. And I think there have been people in the past, and certainly I think I have, that criticize ownership for not necessarily being willing to spend beyond the shop window. And so you do wonder about that. That said, this management team seems pretty happy, and this coaching staff seems pretty happy. So we'll see how it goes out. I mean, they need to figure out the power play, need to figure out the PK. Those are the big tasks, and this is the staff they have, and apparently they think they can do it.
And the other thing is I think Tocchet deserves the benefit of the doubt here.
Sure.
Yeah. For season. So we'll see how all of this. We'll see how all of.
Let me ask you this: how far are we away from having a Sedin on the bench on a nightly basis?
I don't think we're that far. Like I think that's part of it too, right? Like these are guys. There's
going on the road, right?
Well, one of them's exactly. Like they're going to be on the road, so whether they're on the bench or they're eye in the sky, like I mean, that's it is a different coaching model. The Gonchar element where he's not always here is a different way of doing it, but there's a connection there, and the fact that he's around a lot and that he's able to talk with the players and text and like, that is the other thing, of course, is that's how people communicate and that's how people engage with each other. And it's not just face to face anymore, even if us crusty old guys think it should be all face to face. They are trying new things here, and benefit of the doubt. Matt's absolutely right. Like
when they climb the ladder, who's the head coach and who's the assistant coach between Daniel and Henrik? Is it just assumed that it's Henrik because he was the captain? He's the older.
Well, maybe it's a coach. Like does it matter? Like I don't know. It's probably going to be a one guy. Like our instinct says that it's always been one guy, but
maybe
they're different.
There you're breaking the mold. Coaches. No.
I don't think it is. I don't think it is either. I think they will be on their own, and one will be here, and one will be somewhere else. I think you're right.
I don't think they want to be coaches.
What do they want to be, Matt?
Oh, I think they want to be managers.
Yeah, fair enough. Co-general manager, co-presidents.
Could work. Yeah,
works in Andorra.
How do you know
Andorra, is that one of the European micro countries?
Yes. How do you know the political climate of?
They have co-presidents or co-dukes or something. I don't even know. It's the president of France and the king of Spain, or the co-rulers of
cool.
I don't know why. I think it's because of the Tour de France and goes through there once in a while. I'm trying to remember if I did like a grade 5 project. I think I did like a grade 5 project on Andorra, but I don't remember knowing the co-presidents thing.
Andorra heads of government, head of state, Archbishop Joan Enrique Vives y Chichilia. Head of state, Mr. Emmanuel Macron. Head of government, Mr. Xavier Espot Zamora. All of them referred to as Your Excellency.
Oh, try heads of state. Wow.
Unbelievable.
There you go. You learned something.
Next, we'll talk about Liechtenstein.
I was going to say
San Marino.
Far enough. Much as I like the San Marino Grand Prix,
yes,
and the downhill skiers from Luxembourg, we're going to catch up next week.
Luxembourg's small medium now.
Girardelli, right?
Yeah.
Hey, everybody! If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well.